Getting a good youth intake in FM is a dream that so many of us football manager players have. However, the majority of us will wait a whole year for our intake only to find out that those young players that have came through are no good and have no real future. But today we're going to try and help you with that by giving you some tips to make your youth intakes better, to give you a better chance of that golden generation. Along the way, we'll be busting some myths about youth intakes, as well as telling you factors that you might have never considered even affect those intakes. A lot of us know the obvious ones, but as the video progresses, we'll talk about some other factors that have minor effects but can really help you get those better youth intakes. So here we are in FM24. Apologies if my voice sounds strange, I'm pretty ill right now, but like I say, we'll break down all of these factors, give you as many tips as possible for these youth intakes. But firstly, I need to cover two theoretical things that you need to know before we start this video. The first one, and maybe the most important thing you need to know in this video, is that despite everything that we do here to get these better youth intakes, a lot of it is still going to come down to luck. Now, the analogy that I always use in these videos every year that we do them is imagine it like you're playing the lottery in real life, and the lottery win here in FM is getting that golden generation. Now, in real life, obviously the lottery is down to chance. However, if you bought more tickets to the lottery, you're going to increase your odds of potentially winning that grand prize. And it's the same thing in FM. Every tip, every factor that we cover here is going to increase your chances of a better generation, more wonder kids coming through in your youth intake, but nothing is guaranteed, and that should be said. There's no chance that you're going to get a golden generation 5 years out of 5 in FM. But hopefully by following these tips, you can at least increase your chances or buy more tickets of winning this golden generation lottery. The second thing that I need to cover is that your player's ability and your youth intake rating is relative to the club you're at. Now, what I mean by that is in Football Manager, star ratings are reflective of other players in your club. For example, Kobalt and Schlotterbeck are 3.5-star players here at Dortmund and are considered some of our best. Now, that doesn't mean that if we put Schlotterbeck here in a 4th Division English side, he would still be 3.5 stars. No, he'd be a 5-star player, and that's because his ability here is being compared to the other players in this Dortmund team. And for the same reason, if you get a 5-star youth intake or a 5-star potential player with your Wrexham team in the 4th Division of England, it doesn't mean that that player is good enough to play for Real Madrid or Barcelona. No, it means that he is going to be one of the better players in your squad. And at the same time, if it's a 5-star youth intake, that's brilliant for Wrexham, but if you brought those exact same new gen players over to Dortmund, it might only be considered a 1-star, 2-star youth intake. It's all relative to the club you're at, so bear that in mind. And now that we've covered the theoretical things, we can move in to the things that you guys can actually affect. So let's start off with the obvious factors first, and then we'll move on to the things you might not know as the video goes on. But there's 3 things on this facilities screen that have arguably the biggest effect out of anything on the quality of your youth intakes. We have got youth facilities, junior coaching, and youth recruitment. Let's cover those on an individual basis. Firstly, youth facilities. These are the facilities, the equipment that your players have before they appear in your saves. So imagine it as your under 12s team, your under 15s, the teams that you can't see in Football Manager. These are the facilities they're using. The better these facilities, the better these players are able to develop and train in theory behind the scenes before they come through on youth intake day. As soon as they come through on the youth intake day, they'll go on to use your training facilities at the club, and that's the same facilities your first team will use, your under 19s, your second team, whatever it is. Any player that actually exists that you can physically see in Football Manager uses the training facilities. The youth facilities are the facilities that these hidden players use before they come through in your youth intake. So the better those facilities, the better those players can develop before they come to you. Very similar to facilities, the better your coaches for these under 12s, under 13s, invisible teams that you can't see, the better the ability of the players that come through because they would have been developed by better coaches. So improving your youth facilities and your junior coaching are going to improve the quality of those new gen players that come through. The third one is youth recruitment. Imagine this as a net around the area that your club is in. Let's say you're managing Manchester City. If they had average youth recruitment, maybe they only sweep up players from around the Manchester area, but the better your youth recruitment, you can imagine it as having more, say, youth scouts going around to other places. Maybe they're looking in London, maybe they're looking in Norwich, wherever it might be. The better your youth recruitment, the wider the net that you're casting around the world of football to try and sweep up the best wonder kids possible. Now, if you want to know how to improve these, all you need to do is go over to Club Vision, go over to make board request, and there you can request for your facilities to be improved. On the finance section, you'll see junior coaching, and on the network section, you'll find youth recruitment. Ask for these as often as you can, keep improving them, and you'll find that will massively increase the chances of good players coming through at your club. Now, youth recruitment leads us nicely onto our first myth of the video, video, and that is one where a lot of people think reputation plays a huge impact on the ability of those young players coming through at your club. Now, it doesn't necessarily have no impact, it has a slight impact, but maybe not in the way that you'd think. Reputation is only used as a tiebreaker when your youth recruitment matches that of another club. So let's say Dortmund here, we have 3.5-star youth recruitment. Let's take this team, FC Eintracht Rhein. Let's imagine they had the exact same youth recruitment as we did, and as a young player, you come through, you see Dortmund, you see Rhein. How do you decide who you're going to join when they've both got the same youth recruitment and they've both been able to scout you? Well, the chances are you're going to look at the team that's bigger and decide to join them, and that's where reputation comes into play. These youngsters will be more favourable towards joining a team with a bigger reputation, but like I say, that only comes into play as a tiebreaker when your youth recruitment matches that of another club. Now, that doesn't mean that Rhein here can't get some good youngsters. They definitely can. They might even get lucky and get better players than Dortmund got in their youth intake. Very unlikely, but it could potentially happen. But as I mentioned, everything we do here is like buying an extra ticket into the lottery, and the better your reputation, the more chance you've got of sweeping up these young stars and bringing them into your youth intakes. Now, that being said, how do you improve your reputation? Well, pretty simple. You just need to win matches in Football Manager. Win matches, win trophies. Over time, your reputation will increase, which will hopefully give you that little edge when it comes to those youth intakes. Another factor that can massively help your youth intakes is to scroll down and smash the like button on this video. Now, I have no scientific proof to say that it really will help, but you know, there's no scientific proof to say that it doesn't either. So go ahead, hit that like button, and that might give you all the luck you need in your next youth intake. Let's get real for a second though. A factor that actually will affect your youth intakes is a very specific staff member, and that is your head of youth development. To find him, go to your staff section, and he's usually one of the first few on here. If you hover over head of youth development, there you go. Our man is Lars Ricken. Now, what about him affects your youth intakes? Well, there's a few things. Some are obvious, some aren't. Firstly, he's got 3 highlighted attributes here: working with youngsters, judging player potential, and judging player ability. The better that is, the better your head of youth development, and that's obviously going to benefit those young players coming through in your youth intakes. But there's 2 other factors that I would say have an even bigger impact than that. Obviously, you want him to be a good head of youth development, but there's a few things that can really massively affect your youth intakes and how good they are. The first one, and the most important one, is his personality. He has a model professional personality here in game, which is one of the best you can get. The reason this is important is the personality of your head of youth development is often rubbed off on those young players coming through. So if you had a head of youth development with a good personality, the chances are more of those players that come through in your intakes will also have a good personality, which is really going to help them in their development. At the same time, if you had a bad personality in the game and then you got some young players coming through, they could also have that bad personality, low determination, low hidden attributes, whatever it might be, that are really going to affect their growth over the course of your save. So it's really important when you are picking a head of youth development, you take into account their personality. On top of that, you want to take into account their preferred formation. This isn't the be all and end all, because you can still get great young players coming through, but it's quite annoying sometimes when you play a 4-3-3 system, let's say, with 2 wingers and a striker, and the players coming through your youth intakes play left midfield, left wing back, right wing back, that you don't really use in your team. The reason for this could be your head of youth development's preferred formation. In this case, Lars Ricken prefers a 4-2-3-1 formation, so the youth players that he brings through in his intakes are often going to be those that would play in those specialised positions. Obviously, in a 4-2-3-1, you have an attacking midfielder and defensive midfielders as opposed to central midfielders, and you might see that reflected in your intake. Like I say though, it's not the be all and end all, because even if they don't play the same position that you use in your tactic, they'll still be a good young player that you could sell or maybe retrain to play a different position. So it's not the worst thing in the world, but it's always handy to have this preferred formation, or at least second preferred formation, match the same formation that you play in game. One thing we can't disprove or prove though about head of youth developments is to do with their scouting knowledge. Some people have said this has an effect, some people say it doesn't. We're just going to mention it now just in case to cover our backs, and it's never the worst thing in the world to make sure you are looking at this when picking a head of youth development, and that is their scouting knowledge. Now really it makes sense that you'd want your head of youth development to have a good knowledge of the nation that he is doing his job in this case Germany of course, because he's going to have to find wonderkids from around Germany for these youth intakes. So that does make sense. People have also said, let's say he has a scouting knowledge of Honduras as well, that every now and then you'll see a player from the Honduras come through in your youth intake. I can't necessarily guarantee that or back that up, but it does seem to make a little bit of sense. Either way though, check out your head of youth development scouting knowledge, at least bear it in mind, because it could have an effect on your youth intakes. I just can't say for sure. One thing that does actually have an effect on your youth intakes though is actually your affiliate clubs, which might sound strange and I didn't believe it for a few years, but I've actually got an example of it here with Borussia Dortmund. If we go to their affiliates and to affiliated clubs, we can see each affiliate here has some kind of relationship with Dortmund. Buriram United share their scouting knowledge with Dortmund, and we also sell more shirts in Thailand because of this link. The same thing works with this Japanese club. We get their scouting knowledge and we also sell more shirts in Japan. But if we go to Marconi Stallions, I used this example last year as well, you'll see there's an extra line that says, Marconi Stallions may send academy players to train at Dortmund. The benefit of this is we might see some of these players come through in your youth team ranks. Now this made a lot of sense to me because I realised over the years I'd seen a lot of Australian wonder kids come through at Borussia Dortmund and I had no idea why, but now this makes perfect sense. If you have a link with a club in a different country, there's a chance that some of their players can come through in your youth intakes, and it's written plain as day in this line here. So clearly it's a thing that we need to consider, but how can we get these kind of affiliations with other clubs? Well, you go to the club vision screen, once again, make board request, and then you want to go to networking. In there, go over to affiliate club and you'll get some options. Now, I've only just taken over as Dortmund manager here, so they're not going to listen to me, but there's a few different types of affiliate clubs you can choose from. One that allows you to send players out on loan easily, one that allows you to increase your reputation, but I believe this one is going to help you get the similar affiliation to what Dortmund have with Marconi Stallions, and that says, I was thinking it might be worth seeking a partnership with a club that improves our chances of bringing in talented young players from abroad. Now, we've suggested that, and they're actually going to go ahead and look for a suitable club for us. What I'll do now is I'll holiday a few weeks and we can see the results of that affiliated club search. Just a side note to let you know, I do have my own channel linked in the description down below. If anyone feels generous enough to come and check it out after this video, I'd hugely appreciate it. It's more entertainment style than it is informative like we do here on FMSCOUT. So we do some FM rebuilds as well as wonder kids you might not have heard of as YouTube shorts. So if that's something that sounds interesting, I'd really appreciate if you come and check it out. A lot of you have done so and have loved it, but let's get back to the video. So here we go, about 20 or so days later, the board have returned this where they've given us 3 options, 2 Belgian teams and 1 Portuguese team, and all of them have this note. They may send academy players to train at Dortmund and we'll have the benefit of those players coming through in our youth team ranks. So we could suggest one of those teams and all of a sudden it gives us just that extra chance of having those good players come through in your youth intakes. So, youth intakes can be affected by your facilities, staff members, and even your affiliated clubs, but there's actually a factor that you can do absolutely nothing about that plays a huge impact on your club's ability to generate good young players. Now, you might have noticed a lot of the time in your saves, you find good wonder kids coming through in Brazil, Argentina, and you see them much more regularly than you see wonder kids generating from, Papua New Guinea or China, wherever it might be. And that is because every nation in Football Manager has a hidden attribute, 2 hidden attributes in fact, called game importance and youth rating. Now, they have a huge impact on the quality of youngsters able to come through in certain nations. Let's start with game importance. That's how important the game of football is to that nation. Say Brazil, Argentina, England, the place where you normally see wonder kids come from in game. Obviously, football is massive in those nations. That means more kids playing football and therefore more chance of wonder kids from those areas. Take the US, for example, even though football, or soccer as they call it, is growing over there, their game importance is going to be lower than other nations because they also enjoy a lot of other sports, American football, basketball, whatever it might be, and in some nations football just isn't played as much. The game importance is lower and therefore you'll see less wonder kids coming out of that country. The second one is youth rating. Every nation has a rating for how good they are at producing good young players. I believe it's out of 200, could be wrong there, but I believe it is. Let's say Brazil might have a rating of 170 and China maybe 100. Again, this isn't something you can really change. There is something called dynamic youth rating in game, which means if you were managing in China and you kept winning over and over the years, there's a chance that youth rating could go up a little bit, but really it will take a very long-term save and the majority of you aren't ever going to feel those effects. So of course, both of these things are factors to take into account: game importance, youth rating, things you can't change that are going to have a huge impact on your youth intake purely depending on what country you are managing in. So if you are managing in Germany, England, Argentina, Brazil, lucky you, but if you're managing in a nation with a lower youth rating and game importance, it's going to be a lot harder for you to have those wonder kids come through in your youth intakes. It's not impossible, it's just less likely to happen. And with that being said, that is everything we need to cover that can improve your youth intakes in-game and give you the chance at that golden generation. If you think we missed anything, if you have any questions, let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video. Sorry again for my voice in this one. Hopefully it's been okay. But thank you guys so much for watching. Good luck in your youth intakes, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.